Hello and welcome back to the Sex and Healing podcast. I'm your host, Erin, and thank you so much for joining me as we take this wild ride together through the realms of sex and healing. In today's episode, we are going to be diving into pleasure proficiency. So if you haven't already, I would love if you subscribe to this podcast. I'd love if you share it with someone in your world who could do with some more pleasure. Hint, that is all of us. And if you feel called, I'd love if you were to leave a written review on iTunes. So we have just come out of running a very successful pleasure challenge. So we had nearly 400 women signing up from all over the world. And I mean all over the world. We had, of course, Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, England. I'm not surprised by those places because I've lived in those places. I've visited those places. We share some similar cultural values. What really blew me away was that we had women from India, from Bangladesh, from Sudan, in Africa. This work has spread and reached parts of this world where pleasure is forbidden, where I am still so overwhelmed by the fact that little old me is reaching an audience as far-reaching as that. I'm so freaking grateful because I know that we are riding a wave of change on this planet where we are able to access this information to empower ourselves and empower other women and empower daughters and mothers and sisters and friends through the revolution of our birthright of pleasure, that we can reclaim it from its shamed and dirtied, controlling hands of the patriarchy and induce pleasure in our life in far more than just a sexual capacity, but to have pleasure as part of our daily lives and our daily experience. It was an absolute joy to see these women transform, to read the comments in the group every day, to see the way the ladies were all engaging with each other, celebrating each other, sharing breakthroughs, sharing celebrations, even their hardships and where they were struggling. 400 women who would have been mostly strangers to each other, loving and supporting and celebrating each other, all in the name of pleasure, was an incredible highlight of my career. Honestly, it was a milestone for me, without doubt. I want to yet again thank my amazing team that work behind the scenes to help create something like this, because I, despite the fact that I have great intelligence and great capability, am incapable of doing such things. Just because I can doesn't mean I should. I've worked myself into the ground in the name of business, near burnout, and it's overwhelming, it's stressful, it's the antithesis of pleasure. But in order to really grow my business and to share my message, I need to be supported. And to really honor that within myself and know what is my genius and what is the work that I need to do and what is not the work that I need to do, and to be empowered enough to be able to outsource it, to allow myself to receive enough to let other people provide for me in that way. It's big work. And now that I have this team of two amazing women and myself, things are changing drastically in my business, and we're reaching more people with our message, and the way that we're sharing the message and what the message is just keeps amplifying and growing stronger and better. And I'll take a little detour for a second and talk about my team, because A, I love the shit out of them. B, I rant and rave about them all the time. But C, we run things around here in a very different way. And that, I'm sure, has a lot to do with pleasure and a lot to do with the fact that we are three feminine beings. And my intention is that they love to do this work. that they feel very connected to the mission, that they feel as rewarded by the work that we're doing and the change that we're making as I do, and that they're not my employees. It's really important to me that employee comes with a passive mindset. It comes with me being the one that's responsible. And I wanted to create the opposite of that. I wanted to create an environment where people are very self-motivated, very empowered and inspired to make decisions and to create new ideas and to bring their genius and contribute their genius. And I think we've really hit the sweet spot with how the three of us work together, the different gifts that we each contribute, and how harmoniously they work together. So one team member, I call her Daddy, because I know I thrive with a daddy, with dominance. So she's our work daddy, and she is the strategic one. She's the structured one. She's the one that probably leads the operations, I would say. We all lead in our own way, but she is our work daddy. And then the other team member I have is the creative genius, and I found out, is a projector in human design, and projectors need to be invited to speak often. So she doesn't speak all that often, and when she speaks, she drops a bomb. Her ideas and her creativity and her foresight, they both have this amazing foresight. And when we have our team meetings, we often draw oracle cards. We sit and tune into our intuition all the time. We channel what we're meant to do. We're feeling into it. We're using our business acumen, our training, all the different life experience that we have, as well as our intuition and our guidance to create whatever we're creating. So I'm very excited to take these girls on a retreat while I'm in Australia, and they're both here in Australia. We're going to go down and spend a long weekend down on the peninsula, and we're going to do our yearly planning meeting face to face, in person. We're going to do a yearly planning. We're going to break it down into a quarterly plan. I'm going to take them to the hot springs. We're going to focus on nourishing ourselves, celebrating ourselves, but also, because these girls are both independent, because they're not just employees of me, they both have their own business as well. And I love that. I love that there are things that they could gain from working with me that would celebrate and support their own businesses. And a rising tide raises all ships. So my intention is that as my business grows, as I have more success here, that they benefit from that success, and not just financially, but also with the knowledge or the experience or the learning curves that they can contribute back into their own business. So I want that yearly planning meeting to not just be about my business and erinkinder.com, but about theirs. And how can we each as a team support their goals and their dreams, and what's their vision? And one day they might reach a point where they don't want to contribute to this anymore because their business is growing in a way that it needs their full-time attention. I want to support that wholeheartedly. I never want someone to stay working for me because they feel obligated or trapped. But also to know that this may be a stepping stone. It's likely that this may be a stepping stone for one of them or both of them at some point. And how can we make that transition like a jumping off point that's a positive experience all round, and that we could transition from team member to a new team member easily? I want to foster that kind of environment. And of course, I've had learning curves bringing people on into my business prior to them, and some that have been emotionally difficult, disappointing. There's just been, and maybe this is the learning curve that all businesses go through. I think it's also about putting the right person in the right role, for starters, knowing what that person's genius is, making sure they're doing their genius and not something outside of that. But then there's also a deeper level of values alignment, that they're aligned with the work, that they are self-motivated and self-driven and achievement-oriented. But then there's also an energetic component. There's the energetic component of how we resonate as a team. So if you imagine like we're all each an instrument and we're in a little band, do our instruments harmonize together well? Are we playing at a similar tempo and rhythm, and is it harmonious, or is it a chaotic cacophony? But then there's also the energetic transfer of the work that we're teaching. So given that we're working in the realms of sexuality and spirituality, the message that I have to share, my intention, if I'm like the heartbeat of the business, and my knowledge and my experience and my gifts are what we're transmitting to the world, but that then goes through another person, whether that's a process, whether that's a copywriter, whether that's a social media post, the frequency, you want to retain the frequency as best as possible, because as it goes through other people, it'll change slightly. So if someone doesn't hold the level of consciousness that's aligned with the message, and I don't say level as a hierarchical level, but just the recognition that there's so many different frequencies, and as you continue to grow and develop sexually and spiritually, you want people that are aligned with that, or otherwise the message gets distorted or it doesn't come out as clearly. It's not going to reach quite as many people. So that's another component, is also making sure that the mind, the emotions, the energy, the spirit, the sexuality is harmonious, and portraying this message as cleanly and purely as possible. So I love my team. Girls, I fucking love you. I can't say it enough. I love what we're creating in the world, and this pleasure challenge is largely down to these girls making it possible. So thank you so much. And all the women in this challenge also thank you for making it possible. So when we're in our pleasure challenge, we're really having a look at what is our pleasure proficiency. So proficiency really is our level of expertise. And like anything, and in business, that's a great segue, we need to have a level of expertise in order to be able to do it well. And pleasure is exactly the same. It's not necessarily something that comes naturally to everyone. There are some people, and I am one of those people, that were inclined towards pleasure from a very young age and had to wear my fur coat to my brother's soccer games, and always had to wear dangly earrings, and loved soft textures around me, and was very driven, very, very driven by beauty and pleasure. But everyone has the capacity to increase their pleasure proficiency, to have a look at what areas in life they can bring in more pleasure, how they could expand their pleasure repertoire of the things that bring them pleasure. And in fact, every single thing that we can do in life could be more pleasurable. And that's really what I encourage, is that we don't need to spend money. We don't need to get training. We don't need to have fancy equipment, but we can actually bring pleasure into our daily lives moment to moment with our intention and our focus. So we can make food more pleasurable, perhaps by plating it differently, or having it in a different environment, or sharing food with people, or not eating it out of a Tupperware container straight from the microwave. Whatever that might be, we can make every meal a pleasurable food experience. We can make our home environment more pleasurable by upgrading the pleasure standards of our home. That might be something we want to financially invest in. You might be ready to actually move out of where you are and go to the next level. You might want to do a big clear out in the house and get rid of all the junk and clutter that's been accumulating. You might want to bring in fresh flowers and go for a walk through the neighborhood and grab some local fauna and fauna from the park. If you're allowed to do that, I don't know if that's illegal in Australia. But when I live in Bali and Hawaii, tropical flowers are everywhere, and you can get beautiful big leaves and gorgeous flowers and fill your home with fresh flowers. You can have music streaming. You could have essential oils on. Some of these require financial investment, some don't. Either way, there's always more available to us. And that's really what I encourage, is that we expand our capacity in all ways, that we expand our sexual pleasure capacity, that we expand our spiritual capacity, and that we expand our pleasure capacity. How much we allow ourselves to receive. And so much of that comes down to what we've been taught. What are the baseline subconscious beliefs that are ingrained in us as to what we're worthy to receive, whether receiving pleasure is a good thing, or whether it's a sinful thing, or whether it's a dirty or forbidden thing. So it's really interesting to have a look at your family history. What were the stories that were passed down through the feminine line of ancestors and through the masculine line of ancestors when it comes to pleasure and when it comes to femininity? So I know some of the messages that were in my family was that being feminine was weak, and superfluous. It was unnecessary. That the value lay in academic achievement. It was not, I was allowed to wear my fur coat to my brother's soccer games when I was 8. My fake fur coat, mind you. But it wasn't something that was really encouraged or understood. It was tolerated and accepted, but there were lots of ways in which it was shut down. That it wasn't okay to be super feminine, wasn't okay to be super girly, wasn't okay to want extra attention. I wanted to be on stage, I wanted to do modeling, I wanted to do acting. And there was this constant tacit message like, stop trying to get attention, stop standing out, no, you can't be on stage, no, you can't do modeling, put your head down, get a good education, get a good career. So there are all these limitations and sense of guilt or shame around wanting pleasurable things, wanting to have a pleasurable environment, wanting to prioritize something as superfluous as pleasure. But then there's other women who grow up with a very different message where your only job is to be feminine, and you're not here to get an education, and you're not here to do anything but to be seen for being feminine and beautiful and pretty. And if you're not feminine and beautiful and pretty, then there's a problem. So we, in our Pleasure Challenge, took a deep dive into these historical stories and the subconscious limitations that we might have, because whatever's happening in the subconscious, doesn't matter what we want on a conscious level, the subconscious is always going to win. So if you've been conditioned with these feelings, and I realized my final day in Melbourne before coming on this trip that my previous partner, my ex-boyfriend, I guess we'll call him, helped me prepare for my trip and bought me food and cooked for me and helped me pack up and checked that I had everything. And I was so unfamiliar with that level of care. It was very fatherly, and it was something that I never got, that I felt fucking immensely guilty. And as we lay down to go to sleep, and he kind of fell asleep before me, and I was just kind of tucked up into the small spoon position, and I was like, you selfish, entitled, ungrateful brat, is what was running through my head. I was like, oh my God, I still believe that? That's messaging that I heard a lot through my child, especially ungrateful, entitled, and spoilt. You know, I'm not allowed to ask for more. I'm not allowed to have people care for me. I'm not allowed to receive. So I'm nearly 40. I turned 39 in 2 months. So 14 months away from turning 40, and I still have these messages from my childhood in my head. That's the power of the subconscious. So it's really important to go into the belief systems. It's one thing to upgrade our pleasure proficiency in the world around us, but until we do the inner work, we're actually incapable of receiving what is around us. There might be more pleasure around us all the time, and we can't even let it in, or we can't see it because of what's happening. If there's shame that's been deeply, insidiously ingrained into our head around pleasure and around sexual pleasure, if we have a lazy mindset, or we're too busy, if we have limiting beliefs around our worth and our ability to assert ourselves and our needs and our sexual needs, if you are disconnected from your physical body, like that is so common, to live from the head and to disconnect from the body because there's been trauma, or because there's been shame, or just because we live in a world that prioritizes living in the head, and we're not even aware of what our body wants for pleasure on a daily basis, or deeply when we look at our sexuality. It's just unbelievable. I remember I had a roommate. It was so hot one day, and I walked into her room and I was like, babe, she was sitting on the floor doing a coaching call, or she just finished, without a fan, without any kind of air conditioning. She was covered in sweat and sitting on the hard floor. I'm like, oh, babe, let me do something for you. Like, I was so distressed to see her, and she's like, I'm okay. And I was like, let me set you up so at least you're in a comfortable position to hold your coaching calls. Like, let me put a cushion under your bum at the very least. Let me get the fan. She's like, oh, the fan doesn't have a long enough cord. I was like, I've got a spare cord, or I'm going to get you a cord. Let's make this comfortable for you. And that turned into this really big healing for her. was very overwhelming because she didn't value herself enough to give herself those things, to make her environment comfortable. And she was very psychic and connected as well. And she was having this moment and we were crying, and she said, the angels are telling me you're going to teach me to luxuriate, and I need to let you teach me how to luxuriate. And I was like, yes, angels. Yes, I will teach her to luxuriate. I will teach her the value of who she is and how important it is that she treats herself as a valuable being and doesn't tolerate an uncomfortable environment subconsciously, just accepting that for herself and not wanting more, not knowing how to go about more. Like, how many ways are we holding ourselves back and we're not even aware of because it's just become normal, or that's what everyone's always done, or that's what our family does, or that's what society tells of us. So we have a profound ability to change our entire life by focusing on pleasure. Not only do we biohack the body and release all these amazing hormones and chemicals in the body that create so much stress relief, and especially from a sexual perspective, when we look at sexual pleasure and our ability to bring ourselves sexual pleasure, we have the ability to be our own pharmacy and reduce pain. They can scientifically prove that orgasms reduce pain. So if you've got PMS, if you've got a tension headache, if you're stressed, if you're tired, it'll help you get to sleep. There's so many amazing benefits, but we don't know how to utilize this pharmacy inside of us. These natural hormones, way better than taking a medication, is to use your body's own innate healing capacity. And so that's why I'm really, really, really passionate about teaching people to masturbate, because most of us have never been taught, and we just kind of fumble around, but there's actually so much more potential there. And then when you understand it well, not only do you become a better lover to yourself, you become a better lover to others, and you help them become a better lover to you. We all become more empowered. But when we understand that pleasure capacity in our body and we take control of it and we are empowered with it, then we get to utilize that for the benefit in every area of our life. Which is why my masturbation course is called Power and Pleasure, because that pleasure directly translates into personal power. And that's what we saw in the group. I'm going to read you some of the comments from the videos, and it's just incredible. It says, "Thank you, Erin. I am proud of myself that I'm a too much woman. I am shining in and out. These 5 days were incredibly pleasurable. I feel so empowered and magical already. Erin, you've changed my thinking in just 5 days. 5 goddamn days. What the hell was I doing for 44 years of my life? Love you, Erin, and love all the women here and out there who dare to feel empowered and do feel. As Erin says, laugh loud and fuck louder." I love that we learned there's so much pleasure in the world that is more than sexual. Thank you for all your wisdom and your time that you gave us. Thank you so much for this 5 days of pleasure. I've learned so much and you are incredible. I'll be continuing experiencing more pleasure moments in my life. Thank you for these beautiful 5 days. I've learned a lot and I can feel the change already. Thank you for your wonderful gift. Thank you so much for creating this safe container and space. This truly is such a beautiful and sacred stuff to me. Oh my God, this has changed the way I view myself and my world forever. Erin, you're amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Erin. This perfect 5-day top-up after the worship course. Best course ever, I might add. Now that's written in this. I am forever grateful for you guiding me down the pleasure path. I experience and enjoy so much more depths of pleasure daily. Good morning, beautiful. I'm only up to day 2 of this challenge so far, but 100% in for the broader program. I love the self-paced format, but with practical exercises and journal prompts, I've grown so much already. Thank you for creating something so powerful. I was in a sexless marriage for 8 years. Felt the problem was with me and could not look myself in the mirror for years. The first time I did was a few months ago and tears rolled down. It was like grieving loss. Loss of confidence, hatred towards my body, hatred towards me. Terrible, terrible. Now I walk naked around the house. I notice my body much more. I wear clothes that show my body off. I love it. I'm just loving myself. Sex, we'll get there eventually. Thanks, Erin. Today's talk made me laugh. We women have such innate power and we allow others to dissipate it. Ain't doing that anymore. Self-love and self-pleasure are just so underrated. Much love and light to all my friends here. May some of us meet in some lifetime. This practice is so powerful. I did it for the first time with your guided meditation of the Love Breakthrough Retreat a few days ago, and wow, it was such a deep pleasure activity. Definitely trying it later again. Wow, I think I underestimated dancing, or maybe because I have a sense of shame with it. Surprisingly, I loved it so much today, and absolutely every moment and every sensation. I felt alive and free and strong. Absolutely, I'm going to keep it as my daily practice. I was surprised with the amount of pleasure I felt by touching my hands in the way that you mentioned. Thank you, thank you. This challenge is definitely changing me from inside. Love, love, love. I went and saw my mum today, and I could feel this through her too. And I also felt that because of the breakthrough I've had with this challenge, it has also affected her in regards to healing. So very powerful. And the final one, this has been the most potent, sacred, honorable 5 days of healing. So very grateful, really, truly, deeply. So thank you to all of the amazing women all around the world who took part in our pleasure challenge. I'm so excited for you. May our pleasure ripple out and touch the lives of so many others. If you're interested in my Power and Pleasure course, the links are in the show note. I would love to have you come and join me. It's a 4-week self-paced online journey. It's amazing. My team have done an incredible job at taking my content and making it into an online course for you all. So please check it out if you're interested. Share it with someone you love. And as always, if you've enjoyed this podcast, I also ask that you share it. Thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, laugh loud and fuck louder.